Okay, what is good, everyone? Welcome back. Today is going to be a hybrid warlock guide. This spec is really fun. I'm actually surprised that most people don't play this, especially with it's not necessarily easier than affliction, but I would say it's the rotation is definitely in its early development stages. This spec actually has a lot of intricacy that could I mean, it's got a high potential. Okay, so first things first, we're going to be talking about talents. When it comes to talents, again, I think that there's various different, especially when you consider like every single tier of your gear, or they call it phases in Classic. So we'll say every single phase of Classic, I think that your gearing and even your spec would change slightly. But yeah, I'm just going to fill in everything and talk about the talents as we go. So first, you would spec into Bane. You would go 5 points into Bane. This is going to reduce the cast time on your Immolate as well as your Soulfire. So normally your Soulfire is a super long cast, but yeah, Immolate is going to be a core part of your rotation. This actually reduces the cast time of your Shadow Bolt too, but you're not going to be Shadow Bolting. Your filler is going to be Incinerate. Because most of the build, it's going to focus around fire damage more than shadow. So yeah, you go 5 out of 5 Bane, then you go 3 out of 3 to Cataclysm, which reduces the mana of your Destro spells. Again, we're not going to be Shadow Bolting. We don't worry about damage reduction. So the next 2 points will be in Aftermath. That's going to give your Immolate 6% periodic damage. And again, when I talk about conflag later, that's also increasing your conflag damage as well, even though it doesn't say it in the talents. Next 5 points are going to be in Ruin. This is just your crit damage multiplier. This is a very standard part of Destro as well as hybrid specs. Next 2 points, you're going to be putting them into your Imp's cast time. It's called Demonic Power. There's really nothing else that's going to reduce your or increase your damage in these other talents. Maybe you could probably make an argument for Shadow Burn. It would never be part of the rotation, but especially since it does shadow damage, but it might be okay as an instant spell. Next 2 talents are going to be Intensity. The reasoning behind going into Intensity isn't just the pushback reduction, but it's also going to open up this backlash talent, which you're going to need later. So yeah, next talent is going to be into Destro threat reduction, just because you're not going to be using Searing Pain and none of these increase your damage again. So here's where a lot of the damage comes from is your Immolate being improved, and really just this next tier actually. So you're going to go 1 out of 3 backlash, just to open up the talents. You would pick up 5% crit, and then you would pick up 30% Immolate damage. You're going to go down into Ember Storm, which is 5 points. And this is when I was talking earlier about the fire damage aspect. This kind of talent is why you're not using Shadow Bolt as a filler. So yeah, this is going to increase your fire damage by 15%, and it's also going to reduce cast time on Incinerate. So again, that's also solidifying the filler ability aspect. Final point in the Destro tree is going to be Conflag. Now, the remaining points, aside from maybe 1 to 3 points, are going to be in this Demonology tree. So your first 3 points are going to be an improved Imp. This is just going to make your Imp do more damage. And the next 2 points are actually up to you. None of these increase your damage. Personally, I go for 2 points in stamina. Just because if your pet dies, you end up speccing in a Feldom, so it's not that big of a deal if it dies. But if you die, that is a big deal. And improved Healthstone, I mean, realistically, people don't even freaking use it in raids. So anyway, next 3 points are going to be put here. This is a damage increasing talent because later on in the build, the health of your minion is actually going to increase your spell damage. So make sure you go 3 points into Fel Vitality. And for the previous one, make sure you go 2 points in a demonic embrace. This talent does not, this is generally, so this is demonic brutality. This is generally a DPS increase talent, but it is not for this build because you're using imp. So again, we run into the scenario where we have 2 extra points. So I go ahead and go 1 extra point into demonic embrace, and then I go another point into fell synergy, which is going to heal my pet. Again, you could easily put this into either health funnel or improve health stone, whatever you want to play. So that opens the next tree up. These 3 into demonic aegis is going to give you probably like 100 spell power or something like that. So damage increasing talent, make sure you pick it up. And then again, we have the same scenario. So you do have to pick up Soul Link, but again, we do have the same scenario where we have an extra point. I volunteer to put that in Feldom just because if your pet dies, you do lose a lot of your damage. But yeah, you could just hard cast your imp and go another point in somewhere else. Next 5 points are going to be here. This is going to increase. This is Unholy Power. This is going to increase your imp's firebolt by 20%. Next 2 points are going to be, or next 3 points are going to be in Mana Feed and Master Conjurer. These are going to, this is going to make your Spell Stone, or this is going to make your Firestone as well as Spell Stone give you more stats. In Wrath, everybody uses their Firestone. It's not like TBC where it's a wand slot. Everybody uses Spell Stones or Firestone. Another point is going to be Mana Feed. Again, with private server mechanics, your imp does go out of mana, so you want to make sure that he's getting all the mana from your life taps. But again, we have another free point. I go ahead and I put this into Master Summoner for 1 point, and then I put it into full health regen for my pet, just because this combination, this is like when you have enough haste, this is like a 1 second cast. I don't need it to be instant. So yeah, I go ahead and just make sure that my pet gets healed a bunch more. Now we get into the next part. Your next 3 points are going to be put into Molten Core. So we can just read that together. Basically, it is increasing the duration of your immolate. So your immolate goes from like a 15 second to a 24 second uptime. And it also makes it so that your corruption makes it, it has a chance to give you a buff, and that buff is going to increase not only your incinerate damage, but it's also going to increase your soulfire damage. So basically, if you keep corruption up, it's going to give you a buff. That buff's going to make it so your next 3 incinerates do 18% more damage and have a cast time reduction of 30%. So it's basically a mini bloodlust. And then if you're in execute range, you would be using the soulfire aspect of this, which is 18% damage and 15% crit. So here we go into the next few points. Let's go ahead and read Master Demonologist together. Basically, when you have your imp out, it's going to give you 1% fire damage and then 1% crit of your fire spells. It's going to do that for your imp as well as your person. So this is a pretty good talent. So you're going to go 2 points there. And then you're going to go 3 points into demonic knowledge. In tier 7 Abyss, this gives you about 400 to 500 spell power. This is a talent. So it says increases spell damage by amount equal to your active demon's stamina plus intellect. So I don't know the exact numbers on whatever my imp's stamina and intellect are, but basically this is like 300 or 400 spell power. And so you're not going to pick up this talent. This talent is a tank talent, demonic resilience. You're going to go 2 more points into Master Demonologist, which is going to give you and your pet another 2% fire damage and fire crit. So the spec becomes a little questionable because you could vouch to go for 1 point into Master Demonologist and 1 point into Demonic Empowerment. However, based on my own logs, you know, my pet does around 10% of my damage. I'll have my logs later, but just trust me, whenever I go through my logs, I'm kind of leaning more towards a different spec than going into Demonic Empowerment and 5 out of 5 Master Demonologist. So, on with the actual spec. So we're going to go 2 points into Decimation. This is basically your execute talent. This makes it so that once your next incinerate hits your target, you now have a buff called decimation. So your incinerate or soulfire need to hit the target. Then you get a buff that says that your soulfire cast time reduction is reduced by 40%. So this makes it so your soulfire is coming out like super hot. I've had soulfire cast as low as like 1.3, 1.2. So yeah, make sure you pick this up. And these last 3 talent points are where it is questionable on where you want to put them. Personally, I think in tier 7 Bis, you want to put 2 into demonic tactics, and then you want to put 1 into suppression. We'll get into Abyss list later, but if you go 2 points here and then 1 point here, it's like the perfect hit cap. While almost also simultaneously, I think that demonic tactics is going to outweigh the 1 point into master demonologist and 1 point into demonic empowerment. Realistically, all of these talent points are very close together. If you don't have a hit cap, obviously you need to go into this talent because you need your hit cap. But I do think with tier 7, specifically the surplus limb offhand, as well as the Anub Arak wand, I think that this talent actually outweighs any hit rating. And I think that there could even be more. I think that you could go with like hit food or something like that and get that last point into demonic tactics. But I think that the difference there won't be too crazy. So personally, this is the finished spec that I go with on my Warlock. Okay, so for glyphs, you're going to be using these 3 glyphs. First one's going to be Glyph of Conflagrate. This is one of the areas where I think that there is some min-max potential. I know that it would be very annoying to constantly reapply your immolate, but I think that there's actually some min-max there. I think that there is potential where you would just immolate, conflag, and then potentially put up immolate again and have that be the rotation. I haven't tested that. I think it would be very annoying, but I currently play with Glyph of Conflag, so I'm just going to keep this for the guide. Second glyph is going to be Glyph of Light Tap. Your Glyph of Light Tap is going to give you mana based on your spirit. A lot of your Warlock gear, every single phase is going to have spirit on it. A lot of the Wrath Classic gearing paths have spirit on caster gear, so this is just a no-brainer. And then this is the one where a lot of people get confused. A lot of people say that Glyph of Immolate is bad. They would be incorrect because the periodic damage actually increases not only your periodic damage from Immolate, but your conflagrate is going to take, if you read conflag, it's going to instantly deal some damage, and then it's going to deal damage over time. But that damage is based on your periodic Immolate damage. So this is not only increasing immolate damage, but it's also increasing conflagrate damage. So your last glyph is going to be Glyph of Immolate. Some other glyphs that people have theory crafted and thought about would be Glyph of Quick Decay. Quick Decay is, first off, corruption does trash damage when you're playing hybrid. The only way that I could see that this spec could potentially run this is maybe if you were to run, like, if you picked up Pyroclasm as well as a couple points in improved corruption, but I just don't see it. And I don't say that off of feeling, I say that off of, like, numerically. Corruption generally does about a third of your damage that an immolate would do. So that's kind of the comparison that I'm thinking of. So yeah, I don't see, even if you were at absolute bis haste, I don't see it. I don't see this being worth constantly reapplying, even if you're, let's say you're at 1500 haste or whatever, you're basically haste capped. All those globals wasted on Quick Decay. I mean, you also run into the point, so the entire point with having corruption up is so that you get Molten Core procs. You start running into the scenario where your Molten Core is proccing too much. And And even with all that haste, let's say you had all that haste for Glyph of Quick Decay, why do you even need Molten Core to proc? You know, you're running into the point where this Glyph is just, it's just not good in this hybrid build. Both of those things are kind of working. There's several different elements that are kind of working against each other. So yeah, no Quick Decay and then no Incinerate. Incinerate is actually super close. The Glyph of Incinerate, that is actually super close to Glyph of Immolate when you look at overall damage, just because Incinerate is going to be your filler. But generally, the Immolate combination with your conflag damage is going to outweigh the Glyph of Incinerate. Another person mentioned Glyph of Imp. That is super low damage. Don't, not even close. So yeah, that's Glyphs. Okay, so this is the part where we start talking about the abilities. First ability is going to be your Immolate. Your Immolate is going to be a 24-second dot. It does a damage on application as well as a damage over time. The damage over time can also crit, as you can see there. Second ability is going to be your Corruption. So specifically in this build, your Corruption is only there to proc Molten Core, which is in the Demonology tree. This is going to make it so that your next three either Incinerates or Soulfires, so you see there, I have it there, are all going to be, so your Incinerate would be 30% faster, and if you were to cast Soulfire, it would do more damage and more crit. Yeah, but you obviously wouldn't be using Soulfire until you're in Execute. Third ability is going to be your Conflagrate. The way that your spells line up is that Immolate lasts for 24 seconds, and then your Conflagrate has a 10-second cooldown. So you should definitely be aiming for that optimal, at the very least, with your max Immolate, you should be aiming for at least 2 Conflags per Immolate cast. When it comes to spell priority, you're always going to have Immolate up. The only time that you would have it down is in execute range, and not just execute range, but if the boss was going to die before you get the full duration of the Immolate. So let's say that the boss has probably 5 seconds left. I wouldn't Immolate. I would just continue throwing Soulfires. Same thing for your Corruption. Your Corruption, I would never cast that sub 5%. I would just kind of let that start falling off. Next ability in your arsenal is going to be your Curse of Doom. So Curse of Doom, it's the highest damage per global ability that you're going to have. The other curses either don't do damage or they suck. So like Curse of Agony is just terrible for this build. You actually would use it if you, let's say that you have full mana and you don't need to life tap, but you do need to move, and the boss is going to die in less than a minute. Then you would use Curse of Agony. Obviously, you would never clip your Curse of Doom with Agony. If the boss is going to last for at least another minute, you're always going to use Doom instead of Agony. But let's say the boss is going to die in 24 seconds. You need to move, and you have a good amount of mana. Yeah, sure, why not? Just throw out your Agony. Okay, so that is your that's basically what you're going to be using all the way from 100 to about 35%. After 35% happens, as you can see here, I get this beautiful little buff called Decimation. Decimation is going to make it to where your Soulfires not only have a faster cast, but they also do fat damage, and they don't cost soul shards anymore. And it refreshes itself on Soulfire hitting that mob. So really, this isn't that complicated. This is a lot. This is the exact same talent if you were to go Demonology. One thing to note, though, is that it actually matters significantly more with this spec if you're in melee range, that is, just because you have travel time. When you hit 35%, All of let's say you're at max range, as I am here. I'm gonna take that off actually. So if I'm here, ideally I want to cast Soulfire now, but as you can see, I don't have decimation for that that cast because the incinerate hasn't even hit the boss yet. So as Destro, or not Destro, as hybrid Warlock, you definitely want to be in melee range as much as you can. Obviously that changes per boss, but if you're able to stand in melee range, I definitely would. Everything else is kind of just standard Warlock. You're just going to be using Incinerate as your filler, Soulfire and Execute. Always use Conflagrate no matter what. And in your Execute, you're going to start letting Corruption as well as Curse of Agony and Immolate start falling off. Okay, so now we're going to look at a standard rotation. This is MAYXLOL. This is one of the bosses in Nax. Pretty easy boss, but it's a pretty good representation of how I play Hybrid Warlock. So this is for the pull. So as you can see, first things first, I use my Life Tap pre-pull. This is for your Glyph of Life Tap. This is going to give you extra spell power. And if you were watching here, let me kind of help you with my UI real quick. So this is going to be the boss's health. This is going to be my current crit chance. This is going to be my haste and my spell power. So this, in combination with my tier 7 4-piece set bonus, is going to give me extra spell power before the pull. So we're at 1 second before the pull. As you can see as well, I'm using my pre-pot. This is because in Wrath, you are going to have to pre-pot. You can't just use potion after potion. You can only use one potion in combat, so that means that you pre-pot beforehand. So anyway, let's continue. So I queue up and Incinerate. I don't think that queuing up a Soulfire precast, that might technically be a little more damage, but it's also, you got to think you're also having to pre-pot even earlier, so it might not even be a DPS increase. Not to mention it's wasting shards, and it's also really annoying. Anyway, so Potion of Wild Magic, make sure you have your Life Tap up. You're precasting your Incinerate. So your Incinerate hits. Now you're going to put up your dot. You're going to put up your Immolate. You're going to put up your Corruption. And then you're going to put up your Curse of Doom. The thing is, before these two dots, actually, you're going to use your Conflag. Currently on private servers, though, and I'm going to slow down a lot right here. And you'll notice that I do this a lot in my rotation as well. Currently on private servers, after the Immolate lands, and it's a full, you can see this is a full global, right? After the Immolate lands, I don't know if you can notice that, but you actually can't conflag immediately. I don't know what that is. I don't know if it's because my haste, it can't be my haste, but I don't know what that is. Maybe I'm too unintelligent to know, but you can't conflag immediately. So I go for the Corruption second, and then I use my conflag. Well, I should have used my conflag. But I did throw a bomb there, and I put up my Doom. But yeah, we can go full speed now. So normally what I do, Immolate, like I said, conflag, you cannot, on this server, I don't know if it's like that on Classic or whatever, but you can't use conflag immediately. It doesn't register that you have an Immolate yet. So I Immolate, and then I Corruption, and then usually I conflag, but in this case I did Doom. Slight misplay, I think. Another thing here is your Flame Cap. This is another consumable. This is fire spell power. So if you look right here, I actually have, I would have even more if I had stacked my Allu, but I actually have everything going. And then on top of that, I have my fire spell power coming from my Flame Cap for a minute. So anyway, after this, you get all your dots up, you can flag. Very simple, just spam Incinerate. Don't know why I'm looking at my gear, but yeah. Anyway, so as soon as conflag comes up, I make sure I hit that immediately. This is a really very, it's a simple rotation. But yeah. Anyway, so as you can see a little bit further back, the last tick of my Corruption actually gave me a Molten Core. So for the next 3 casts, your Incinerator are going to be incredibly fast. As I said before, another reason why you're not pre-potting Potion of Speed, you're going to go under global cooldown cap for sure. Anyway, so let's continue. So I get my corruption up again. I'm able to get that second conflag before my immolate falls. And then I recast it because it fell off, and then I just go right back to incinerate. So that is your standard rotation. Okay, so now we're going to look at your rotation while you're in execute phase, which is sub 35% for hybrid. So again, for my UI, this is boss health right here. Okay, so we go. Also, another thing to note is that as hybrid, you're not going to use Infernal. Your Infernal is going to be a DPS loss for anything that is single target. If you have AoE, then sure, you can use Infernal because the Infernal actually has Immolation Aura. But for single target, if you use Inferno, you're going to lose the Demonic Knowledge, I believe is the talent name. But basically, you lose like 500 spell power just for using your Infernal. And I don't think it's worth it to lose your Imp for that. Although there could be a scenario, maybe you can, recast it with your Feldom, but I don't think that Infernal is going to be a bigger DPS increase. But anyway, let's continue. So we're about to hit 35%. This Incinerate hit at 35.2, so we are not in Execute yet. So I go for another Incinerate. Now I have the buff, which is Decimation. Just to make sure, because I'm not, this is normal speed when I'm actually playing. But just to make sure that I actually still have the buff, I go ahead and conflag anyway. So now that I have the buff, I hit my conflag, and then I start spamming my Soulfire. So your Soulfire, if you're watching the actual damage over here, your Incinerate's hitting for about 11k. Now your Soulfire is going to start hitting for insane numbers. So big 21k there. And also in Execute, you can even, so you notice I have Lust here as well. You can even go with a Haste Potion for Execute. I go for the Potion of Wild Magic. I think it's both viable. But I also think if I had gotten a Molten Core proc here in combination with Lust, I mean, I might actually go under Global Cooldown Cap even with Soulfire. And it also depends on your gear level. If you're in ICC gear, then you probably always use Potion of Wild Magic. But anyway, let's continue. So you see the boss's health set about 25%. I'm assuming that it's not going to die very quickly. I still have time to put up a Corruption. I still have time to put up an Immolate. But then I immediately go back to Soulfiring. Soulfire. If my Immolate or if my life tap buff here were to drop at this point, I would not cast it again because the boss's health is just way too low. I'd much rather just spam a bunch of Soulfires. But I am going to conflag. So if you notice that my Soulfire is hitting for about 21k, my conflag's hitting for about 12, and then it's got a dot component to it. So it's pretty close. I would say it's worth the global in your execute phase. But really, maximizing your damage in this phase is just going to be straight pumping out Soulfires. So anyway, as you can see, the boss health's at 5%. That means that we don't cast Corruption anymore. There's no way that's worth it. And then got a video recommendation. Boss is at 2% health there. I'm not entirely sure that this conflag is worth it. But we're really pulling at strings at this point, to be honest. So maybe it was. Anyway, the Doom goes off. Obviously, if my Doom had fallen off, I wouldn't recast it. And I probably, if we're in Execute, I'm definitely not going to use Curse of Agony. Okay, so let's quickly talk about our enchants and our gems and stuff. This gemming and enchanting is going to be the exact same as any other Warlock. The only difference is going to be you might either gem or gear for more hit rating. And you might opt to take this point out in suppression, and you would put it in demonic tactics. And yes, this 1% hit is going to apply to all your Destro spells as well. So anyway, getting on with the gems and enchants, you would go with 30 spell power, 20 crit on helmet. You would, in the orange socket, I would go with spell power crit. I would not go with spell power haste. For the blue, or for your blue socket, I would still go with your purified. Purified Twilight Opal. It's going to be 9 spell power, 8 spirit. In all of your reds, I would definitely just put spell power. That is the Sons of Hodir shoulder enchant. I would still go for tailoring. This is the tailoring Lightweave embroidery enchant. For your chest, you're going to get 15 spirit. That is still going to give you the most spell power. For your bracers, you put 30 spell power. For your weapon, I would put 63 spell power. And then currently with my build, I'm actually going with a little more hit rating, so I'll touch on that after. And I would still go engineering, so I have my engineering glove enchant right here. This is a free eternal belt buckle socket, so I would just go ahead and put a 19 spell power in there. This is also from tailoring. This is your 50 spell power, 20 spirit. Your rocket boots, and yeah, that's it for gems and enchants. As far as my hit rating is concerned, the number that you're going for if you aren't spec'd into this is 14% for raids. So 14% is, in combination with a Shadow Priest, is going to give you your 17%, which is your actual hit cap. What I'm doing currently with this build is I am gearing towards 13%, which I'm able to hit in combination with this Midsummer buff. I do think that this talent is weaker than this talent, so I think that for your BIS gear, you could even put in a Cincture of Polarity, which is another belt that comes out of Nax. Okay, so let's talk about consumables real quick. These are all just the things that I do. And also what type of spellstone that I use. So first 3 buffs that I use currently are going to be these Midsummer buffs. They're all going to give you just straight DPS increase. Second buff is going to be your pet treats. So again, with the demonic knowledge talent, any stamina that your pet gets, you are going to get in spell power. So you definitely want to make sure that you give them a little treat. This is your flask. This is potion of speed. So I would go ahead and use this in execute. There are times, again, you're not going to get lust in execute very often, but if you do, then I would use potion of wild magic. But if you don't get lust in execute, I would go ahead and use potion of speed for execute phase. Potion of wild magics, you're pretty much always going to pre-pot with this, and then most of the time you're going to use this, or not most of the time, but if you were to get lust in execute, then you would potion of wild magic. Another consumable is going to be your flame cap. It's going to increase your fire spell power, which all of your damage is fire, at least a vast majority of it, besides corruption. This is 3% crit from Midsummer. This is going to be your pet snapshot. I've been told that this doesn't work in Classic, but it might. This is from AQ20. It increases your pet's damage by 5%. So basically, you summon your pet once you have these equipped, and then after he is summoned, you will swap back to your normal gear, and then he keeps the 5% damage, but he is going to get all the extra normal spell power that he gets from your gear. So finally, which spellstone is, so again in Wrath, this is just used for everybody. I go ahead and use the Firestone. It's definitely better. It's got the direct spells increased damage, and then also you avoid hitting that global cooldown cap with your Incinerate, and potentially even Soulfire. There is also bombs from engineering. There's also a global sapper charge. Other things that you could do are the hit rating food, and then you could just gear around that. Okay, so what I was alluding to at the beginning of the video, when I started talking about how this spec isn't really that min-maxed. So if we go back to conflag rate, so conflag, it does damage based off of your immolate, right? So let's say you put up immolate, your conflag is going to do X amount of damage based on that immolate. Now, the thing about this immolate, though, is that, so you see it's ticking for 1155 right now. This is my tailoring proc. If I were to recast that immolate, it's actually maintaining that spell power all the way through every single tick until this immolate goes off, even though my tailoring cloak actually goes away. So what does that mean? So that means that if I were to conflag right now, this conflag rate is based off of that tailoring cloak that procced like 30 seconds ago. It's going to work the exact same way with tricks of the trade. So let's say you have this immolate, and you get tricks before the immolate, and you were also to get that dying curse before the immolate. That means that entire immolate, as well as this conflag rate, the two conflag rates that I would cast within that immolate range, those two conflags as well as the immolate are going to take the spell power as well as the tricks that were snapshotted on the cast. So yeah, I think that's pretty interesting. I think that is something about the spec that could make it very good. I'm not entirely sure what you can do with that information. Personally, I don't play around that. I don't like recast my immolate whenever I get big spell power procs. But one thing about the immolate is that the immolate's going to last 24 seconds. I mean, that almost perfectly aligns with tricks of the trade. Yeah, you can have some gold, dude. Here you go. This guy. Just take it, dude. Okay, there we go. Congratulations. You are rich. But yeah, with this immolate and with that conflag, I could see some extra min-maxing going on. So yeah, I think that's just about everything I can think of. This spec isn't, as I said before, this spec isn't nearly as complicated as Affliction, but I also think that it has a lot of room. I think it's in its infancy. If we get the same percentages, if we get the same numbers that we're getting on private servers, if we get that on Classic, I mean, man, this spec could actually be a real contender, especially on fights like Malagos, where you don't have 25% execute, but you can play around a 35% execute. But yeah, this spec's super fun. I recommend you try it out. I would say it's my second favorite behind Affliction when it comes to Warlock. So yeah, thanks for watching, and have a good one.